I'm getting attacked by Audis, guys. I came back from the weekend and there's two of them. This one's back again. Let's find out why. So here we have a 2008 Audi RS4, and this thing is beautiful. It's amazing. Albeit it's a little dirty. I think it's been down a dirt road or maybe it rained and they got a little bit of dust on the car, but other than that, it is beautiful. Also, the Audi TT, we just did a video on this one. You remember it was a long list of things and the customer only wanted to do 1 or 2 items. They finally decided to take the next steps and get the rest fixed. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Right now we'll focus on the RS4 because I know you guys were going to love this car. Let's take a look around it. Now in the last video I remarked about a customer that was asking about an RS4, thinking about purchasing it, and then they went and argued with me about my advice. This is not the same customer, just happens to be another RS4. I don't know that I've ever seen one that was yellow. And you can see, as I mentioned, it's a little dirty, but we can look past that and see it's a very beautiful car. It doesn't really have any damage or anything to it. The front end looks amazing. I really do like the looks of Audis, especially like the S6 and the RS models. They really did a good job making it look sporty, look good. This side's not caved in either. As you can see, it is a convertible top. So there's no damage going on with this car. We'll go ahead and take a look at the interior, then we'll pop the hood. You guys are gonna love the engine, it's beautiful.
Wheel agents, as always, we start right here at the gauges. And it says it's 31,000 miles, so nothing. This thing has no miles on it, hardly at all. It's barely broken in, and technically still be under factory warranty if it wasn't so old. One thing that is kind of interesting is it somehow thinks it's March 13th, 2009. Well, 2009 was a lovely year, and we were obviously before the pre-COVID craziness we're experiencing, but obviously it's not. So it thinks it's a year old, which would match the mileage, but that's not the case. We look at the dash, of course. This thing has lived in the garage. Now, mind you, it has been driven on the road to get the patina on the outside, but that can be cleaned up with just some, good trip through the car wash. But the interior is in great shape. Hardly any, barely any dust. It's looking fabulous. One thing that's kind of fun is here's a cute little hidey hole that you can put your, wallet in, or your cell phone. It does have some amazing carbon fiber accents around the gear shift, and you can tell it is a 6-speed. If we come up to the front, you'll see that there is more carbon fiber as it does wrap around the door panel as well. It does have leather seats, and they have a really nice bolster on the side. Not huge, but definitely enough to kind of hold you in place. It does have a very small back seat, but if you had kids, this could be a fun car for kids. And again, carbon fiber there in the back seat as well. As we look at the ceiling, which is the convertible top, you can see no problems, no tears. It's in amazing, amazing shape. Do have some common little controls up there by the mirror, which obviously makes it handy. A nice place to, program in that garage door opener. As always, we end at the steering wheel. It's got a nice perforated leather, and it's in really good shape. It has a nice feel to it as well. So you can definitely take those nice sharp turns while you're enjoying that 6-speed transmission. I'm interested in seeing what the engine looks like, Wizard. Let's pop the hood.
Here we go, guys. RS4 4.2 V8. 420 horsepower and roughly 320 pound-feet of torque. It's got lots of power. It's an exceptionally wide engine, isn't it, Mrs. Wizard?
It is. It's really, really close to this front bumper.
It's very similar to the S6 V10 that I had. It was just as wide, 2 more cylinders, basically. These things sound amazing. They're powerful for their size. They really, really are a good engine, except for timing chains. If you ever have to have those done on these engines, they are in the back, between the engine and the transmission. You don't do the front timing cover. Everything's in the back. The engine and transmission have to be split. Everything looks clean under here, and we really don't have any complaints or issues under here. The only reason why this car is here is because overnight when it sets, in the morning, customer goes to crank it and it takes excessive cranking time. It just crank, 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 crank. And finally it will start. For the rest of the day, it will have no more issues, none at all, until it sits again overnight. So we're going to play the game of what do you think is wrong with this car? Is it A, a throttle position sensor, B, a low battery cranking voltage, or C, a fuel pump? I'll run around the car real quick while you guys figure out your answer.
You run like a chicken.
Yeah, that's what I was intending to do. The answer is C, fuel pump. There's a drain back valve or a one-way valve inside the pump that's supposed to hold volume and pressure inside the fuel line going to the high pressure system, and that is bad. So when you park the car overnight, all the fuel drains all the way back into the tank. And in the morning when you go to crank it, it has to fill that line all the way back up again and build pressure all the way back up again, and then it'll crank. It will hold for a few hours, 5 or 6 hours, but after that it starts to really dive off. It's just a little bit by little bit by little bit. And overnight it's completely bled off. It is a common issue with the RS4s. Luckily we don't have to drop the tank. There's an access panel we can get to the fuel pump and replace it, and it'll take care of this problem altogether. So for those of you that thought it was a throttle position sensor, it's not that, because if that were bad, it would affect it at all times, all different times during the day. It wouldn't matter that it's only in the morning after it's set overnight. For those of you that thought it might be a battery cranking issue or a low battery, you noticed that Mrs. Wizard saw that it was 2009, the date on there, and that's because it has a brand new battery installed. And that did not solve anything. So the battery is not the issue. A throttle position sensor is going to cause issues all the time, or when the engine's warm especially. But not after only when it sets overnight and then perfect the rest of the day. That's not going to be a throttle position sensor problem. Let's move over to the TT. Many of you have already seen a video on this 2002 Audi TT, and it had a list of almost $7,000 of repairs that needed to be done to it. The customer was overwhelmed and said, just go ahead and fix the steering rack so that we can steer, and then we're trading this thing off. We are done with this car. But when they went to the dealership to start trading it off, they started seeing a lot of things you guys are experiencing already with the inflation. I don't know if it's a crisis or whatever you want to call it, but everything they looked at, they anticipated X amount of dollars, and it was way higher than that. Almost double sometimes what they had anticipated spending, and they're like, this doesn't make financial sense. This car is worth 10 grand, not 18. And I can only imagine they're probably lowballing them on the trade-in on this. And when you put those two together, it really came down to the idea, we're going to lose money, whether we trade it in or whether we fix it. Which is going to be the smallest amount of loss? And they decided the smallest would be just to go ahead and fix everything and drive it. Which, even though as expensive as it is, it's really a nice car. It deserves to be fixed up. The things that it needs are just service items. There's so many of them that it tallies up really quick. But they'll go ahead and get everything else that we mentioned fixed, and they'll have a nice car, and they won't be in the boat of having a car that's so expensive they bought a new or slightly used car. Who knows what the market's going to do in a year or 2 or 3 years? It could just bottom out. Actually talked to Euro-Asian Bob, not Urination Bob. It's Euro-Asian Bob. He was just here today, and he said, I went to an auction, 620 cars went through, and he says, you know how many I bought, Wizard? 0. He said the cars are going for almost new pricing at the auction, and then they're going to be marked up from there at the dealerships. He was like, this is so mad, this is nuts. And now I start to understand what these people are talking about. Whatever it was they saw when they went to the dealership, they were like, oh, hell no. We're just going to fix our car and keep driving this thing. So here it is again. Phase 2 of the Audi TT. We're going to go ahead and finish up the rest of the list. Steering rack's been fine. They're happy with that. They said, let's go ahead and get everything else done. I actually like Audis. What I don't like is how much it costs people to fix them. You guys already know from the previous video, it's so expensive to fix these. This guy's going to get lucky. He just needs a fuel pump and he'll be out the door. If he keeps on holding on to this car, there'll be more. You don't keep an Audi for 10 years and not have to put thousands into it. They are so expensive to keep running. You guys remember that I had a 2006 Audi S6, or maybe it was an 07. I'm not sure the exact year. But it had the V10. It was similar to the V10 that's in the Gallardo. Not exactly the same, but similar. And it had an amazing sound. But it had the seats like this RS4 where the bolsters are so sharp. And I'm a big guy. It wasn't comfortable. It really started to bother my back after a while. And that's not the car's fault. That's my fault. But another thing I didn't like about that car, and I haven't tried to drive this one crazy, but I actually took my S6 on the pig trail, which is in Arkansas, and it's curvy all through the mountains or hills or whatever you want to call them. I was following behind the Lotus S4S you guys have seen in the shop before. I followed behind some Porsches, Lamborghinis, different cars, and they were going over pretty at high speed over bumps and things, and they were handling it just fine. They'd go over the bump and go around the curve, no problem. But every time I went over the bump, the suspension would bound up and then literally leapfrog in the air. I actually went airborne a few times and it scared me so bad. I finally would slow down. I'm like, what is wrong with this car? That Gallardo just went over this bump. It didn't fly up in the air, but this one did. Finally, I did some research, and it's a common issue on the S6 that the suspension is so tight that it's almost dangerous. And that's when I decided I don't want this thing anymore. As awesome as it sounds, it's a cool car. I really don't feel like flying into the bushes or into a tree going over a bump. Another thing I didn't like, which is probably a very similar situation to this RS4, is everything is bumper off, engine out. A lot of the oxygen sensors and things on the S6 are engine out job. The starter is an engine out job. I was like, no, I don't have time for this. This is crazy. And I sold it, and hopefully whoever has it is still enjoying it. But there are really goods and really bads about Audis. Whenever you buy one, you have to understand that you're going to take the good with the bad. That was actually one of the things that Mrs. Wizard asked on the 308 before I bought it. Is there any inherent problems? Is there a lot of bads that come with the good? And really, it's a Ferrari. Things are expensive. She knows that. We were looking at some seats, $2, $3, $4 grand. I don't know what it's going to cost just for a set of seats. That's unheard of for a Camaro or something. There's a lot of parts I've already installed on it that are way higher than you would imagine. But Magic Mike has been working on that, and the engine on there, it's not hard to work on. These are hard to work on. These are the kind of cars that make you very angry to work on. You don't really get so angry working on a 308. Everything's accessible, easy to get to, and it's actually calming to the mind to know I'm working on a Ferrari. And all as cool as these are, the nameplate doesn't really do very much to calm your mind when it starts getting tough under the hood. Another thing about Audis, especially all the new ones, is if you want to do any work on the front of the engine, the bumpers have to come off. And they're actually made to do that with the core support, the radiator, everything that's up front. They actually what's called service position. They're actually designed that you need to take those off to get to some of those parts. And that just freaks people out whenever they get their car work done and they say, I want this or that done. And you're like, yeah, the whole bumper and the whole everything has to come off. And they're like, what? And finally, they go home and they search around on the net and they're like, wow, this is a common Audi thing. I never knew that. This is broke, take the bumper off. That's broke, take the bumper off. It's just like, whoa, and it adds up really fast. Whatever you would think a typical job would be on a certain part, if it involves the bumper coming off, that adds to the bill. It adds up fast. So I deal with that a lot in the shop with Audis. It's sticker shock as far as the repair bill. I frequently get, oh, and then a little bit of silence, and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll have to call you back because This is way more than what I thought it would be. They call a few other shops and they quote them even higher prices than what we quoted them, and then they're like, oh my goodness, this is real. I can't get out of this. What do I do now? So make sure to keep that in mind if you're looking to purchase an Audi. Beautiful cars come with a price tag. Ferraris, Audis, Bentleys. The more the car costs, usually the more it costs to fix it, obviously. But when you're driving them and everything's working right, they are so nice or so sweet. Just make sure you budget when you go to purchase a car like this. You're going to have really high repairs. Is an Audi expensive to own? Yes. Is it very expensive to own? Yes. Is it fun to own? Yes. So you need to decide, is it worth the fun versus the cost? That's a decision you have to make. So if you're curious what kind of tools we're going to use to fix this really sweet RS4, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button, because there's cars in the shop back there you're not looking at that are here. There's going to be more and more and more videos. Thanks for watching.